This is CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Today, the August primary is less than 3 weeks away. On the Democratic ticket for governor, there are 5 candidates, and the winner of that primary will go head-to-head against the top Republican candidate in the race. Joining me now is one of those Democratic gubernatorial candidates, Joel Brennan. Joel, welcome to CityCast Madison.
Bianca, thanks for having me.
Yes, it's really great to have this opportunity to get to know you better. Let's start with the basics. Briefly, why do you think you are the best candidate to be Wisconsin's next governor?
Well, I've had about 2 decades of exclusively executive experience. Over the course of a 30-plus year career, I've been a problem solver in government, in the nonprofit sector, in business. And the longest stint I had was as the head of the largest science technology museum in Wisconsin called Discovery World. We can talk about that if you want. But the most relevant experience that I had is having been the top appointee for Governor Evers on his cabinet as Secretary of Administration for 3 years, including during COVID. And that was the time, you're in Madison, you know lots of people who work inside state government. I have never been more proud of working alongside people than during COVID, because we needed to get millions of dollars out to family farmers, to small businesses, to renters and homeowners who were otherwise going to have huge problems, or even people were going to die. And that was when government worked. And I think I want the job. I think I can do the job because I have made government work. And I think that's what we need right now. Instead of just being about vengeance, instead of just being about grievance, it's got to be about how are we getting somewhere and getting things done.
I'm sure that's music to many folks' ears. I think solutions are what people want, and actually getting them across the finish line for the state. So we're talking less than a week after a couple of pretty big shakeups in the race. Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez dropped out of the running because of some mismanagement of campaign financing. And then Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley re-entered the race. I know you know all of this. How has this week changed the game for you?
To be honest, it's changed nothing for me. My challenge from the beginning has not been that people think I'm unqualified. When people see and they hear from me about the experience that I've had as being a problem solver, as the top appointee in Governor Evers' cabinet for 3 years, and the vision that I have, the other experience I have as just an executive, I think they see me that I can do the job. The challenge has been I'm just not as well known everywhere. And so, that's what I continue to do. Last night and yesterday, I was in La Crosse. I had an event with about 60 people in someone's home. I went and did a town hall meeting, and just kind of without filter, without anybody else around, just people could come and ask me questions. We put the questions in a bucket and I answered them until people were, satisfied, or at least until they were done asking questions. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. There's every day brings with it opportunity. I would say that the fundraising that I have had has picked up markedly in the last several days. The things about the last week, and the fact that whether it was, Sarah's campaign flaming out or David's indecision and deciding to come back in, all of that stuff, it has gotten people's antenna up so that they're paying attention to the race far more than they had for a long time. And that's an opportunity. This is when people are beginning to decide. I expect that the level of intensity, the level of attention is only going to increase in the next several days. And that's an opportunity for me, because when people pay attention, they start to pay attention to the most important question for Democrats is who can beat Tom Tiffany and Donald Trump, who can govern starting on day one, because all the issues that we care about not going to be addressed if we can't be successful this fall.
So it sounds like nothing much has changed for you, but the race itself is pretty different. It opens up folks to digging deeper into the different candidates. This seems like probably forever ago, but thinking about when you first entered the race, you were the last candidate to enter what was already a pretty crowded Democratic primary. Was that just timing, or did you join to fill a specific gap in the candidate field?
It really was about timing as much as anything else. I'm on a leave from a job that I appreciate and have done for the last 3.5 years as the head of the Greater Milwaukee Committee. I wanted to make sure that that was well tended before I stepped away from it, and wanted to make sure that that was going to be in good hands. We were able to do that. The day that I announced ended up being my mother's birthday. My mother passed away more than a decade ago. But I found that, there was, if I could do something on that day on December 11th, like that has meaning to me personally. So that was part of it. And that was 8 months ago. It was a long time ago. And I have traveled thousands of miles since then, met thousands of people, gotten to be a better candidate, gotten a chance to listen to people in every corner of Wisconsin. And I think that I am well equipped now for the final weeks of the campaign. And I feel like there's momentum behind me. And again, people are the biggest question that they had. It was a whisper many months ago, but now it's a roar, is who can beat Tom Tiffany? How can we be successful? How do we get a candidate in the general election that doesn't have skeletons in the closet, that doesn't have put us on the defensive? We're going to be talking about other issues throughout the general election campaign that don't put Tom Tiffany on the defensive for being an acolyte of Donald Trump. Like, how can we make sure that we are doing those things? Because it is hugely important to win the governor's race, but it is as important to get a majority in the state Senate, to get as close to a majority, if not a majority, in the state assembly. That's how we can truly make things change, and how we can address the problems that people are having in Wisconsin, because they are manifold. And I have heard about them over the last 7 months on the campaign.
I want to dig into your experience. I want to talk about how you envision beating Tom Tiffany. We'll get to that in a moment. But part of what you shared is letting folks know who you are. And as you've talked about, in 2019 through 2022, you served as Wisconsin's top cabinet official under Governor Evers, as the secretary for Wisconsin Department of Administration. I think you're going to have to tell us outside the Capitol civilian folk what that was, like what experience that was. And as you noted, you've held leadership roles in Milwaukee's business and nonprofit spheres. So talk about your experience, what you've done, and how you see it translating into you being governor.
Yeah. Well, and even well before that, the biggest experience I have is I'm the 10th of 11 kids. So I grew up amid chaos and trying to find organization amongst chaos, and sometimes that's what governing is like in Wisconsin. And so the job that I had with Governor Evers was Secretary of Administration in Wisconsin. Inside the Capitol, it's the Department of Administration, sometimes called the Department of All, DOA, because it is the place that has purview across everything that goes on in the enterprise. So it's where the state budget gets done, all of human resources for 35,000 people in state government, the connections to local government, procurement, information technology, doing things as varied as negotiating the compacts with the Native American tribes over Indian gaming, managing the state capitol police, doing programs around energy assistance in Wisconsin. So it truly is as wide a role as possible. And it is like an extension of the governor's office, but the job is to run the executive branch and make sure that we can use all the levers in the executive branch. And that makes me different than other candidates who are in this field, who have served in the legislature and know stuff about the legislative branch. Getting everything possible out of the executive branch is the governor's job. And that's, I feel like I am well equipped to do that. I did that, as you say, for 3 years, in addition to all the work that we did at the start. And that was after, I'm going to remind you, 8 years of Scott Walker and Republicans in the legislature. And there were lots of messes to clean up. We created a $4 billion surplus, took a rainy day fund that started with less than $200 million, grew it to almost $2 billion. So there were lots of things that we did. And then COVID hit. And we were in a position where we had to make government work for people in family farms, in small businesses, in communities around the state. And my job was to organize those resources, create programs that got those into the hands of people. I was, really proud that Wisconsin led the country in terms of the amount of money that went directly into the hands of businesses. And we were able to be successful
during
there.
COVID.
During COVID, we were able to get those out, and we're a state leader. There were programs that we created in Wisconsin for music venues, for that independent music venues. It ended up being the, kind of the model for what they did for the Save Our Stages nationally. And I was just really proud to be able to work alongside lots of people who I have been around throughout my career. And that was a time, I've said it before, where government had to work, and like I had to work alongside people who were doing their day job in government that was disrupted. But then they had this other job where exclusively the governor and the executive branch had the responsibility to spend these federal dollars, and we needed to get those dollars out the door. So all of that to me, that's that 3-year window. That's part of the last 20 years where I've ultimately been, the person who's held to account for profit and loss, for hiring and firing, for, the running complex organizations, for standing up to extremism.
You're talking about your experience in business.
That's what I have been over the course of a career. And I think that's what people are looking for when it comes to an executive who's going to be in charge in Wisconsin. And I hold that executive experience up to everybody in the field. And I think that I am Democrat or Republican, I am heads above the field in terms of that experience and demonstrated effectiveness.
I think one of the differences between you and the other candidates are serving as an elected official and, being in the legislature for some of the folks. Can you expand a little bit more on how you would work to get things done in the legislature and work together with them? Because that's, as you know, been the story of struggle, biblical levels of conflict.
Most anybody who served in the legislature, in recent times, I think they would almost admit to you that where they have been in this legislature, where we have been in Wisconsin, the legislature is dramatically different than where we're going. For the first time in a generation, the Democrats have the ability, the opportunity to create a majority in the state Senate. It'd be an upset if we didn't, and a majority potentially in the state assembly. And, but no matter what, it's going to be a 1 or 2 seat majority. And anybody who says they've exercised these muscles about how do you get things done where the same set of allies on issue X are not necessarily going to be the same set of allies on issue Y. Like that's the way I have operated in local government, in business, in the nonprofit sector, even when I was in state government. Like it's not like at the Department of Administration, I had the responsibility to work with the legislature on the state budget, on the capital budget, on any number of issues. And those were things that I have done throughout my life. And so I think we're entering into a realm where you can have pragmatism towards government and actually be able to get stuff done. And I'd like to think that that's where people want us to meet them, where people who are hurting when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to the education system in Wisconsin that's pitting property taxpayers against kids, where there are limited housing opportunities. People want there to be fixes for those things, and they don't necessarily need you to be clinging to ideology. I'm going to be a proud Wisconsin progressive no matter what, but I think they want to see some forward movement more than they want to see us be about just winning and seeing the world as this zero-sum game where in order for me to win, you inevitably have to lose. Like we don't have to play that way that has been played over the last 16 years since Scott Walker came to Wisconsin and really created a Wisconsin that many of us don't even recognize.
It tends to create more losers with that mentality. And yeah,
sure does.
Working together is ideal. What you just shared leads me directly into my next question, which is what do you think are the biggest issues facing Wisconsinites and how you would address them as governor?
Yeah, I mean, the first issue that you hear, no matter where you go around the state, is around healthcare costs. And, it doesn't matter whether you're a young family, whether you're a retiree, whether you're a small business owner trying to provide insurance. Like it is the issue, and things are getting markedly worse at the federal level. This is how cynical things are in the Trump administration. The worst of the Medicaid cuts come after the midterm elections. So, some people are hurting now, but it's going to get markedly worse next year. And so Wisconsin must be in a position to do something about it. The things I have laid out are things like, creating a public option in Wisconsin, building on the state employee health plan, expanding Medicaid being one of, the 40 plus states that have already done that, making sure that we can do things to lower the cost of prescription drugs. They could do this at the federal level and they haven't. And, we have the opportunity to do those things. There's there are things in the course of 8 months on the campaign, I have yet to find somebody to defend the pharmacy benefit managers. These are the people between the manufacturers and the pharmacies, and they are just jacking up prices. There's a pharmacy that had a space in Eagle River and in Land O'Lakes. They've been open for nearly 100 years. They closed this spring because the pharmacy benefit managers are making it so expensive for them to fill prescriptions. They're as busy as they ever were, but because every prescription costs them, they were unable to stay in business. A family-owned business. Like, this is what we're up against in Wisconsin. We need solutions on that.
Yeah, it's like, why am I using Good RX? Why am I using some outside company to find cheaper prescriptions? Like, people are making money on helping people find out how, they're being gouged for their medicines.
Right. And again, like, that's just something. And there are issues that we have around delivery of care in Wisconsin. There are places in the Chippewa Valley, they've had 2 hospitals close and 18 clinics. And, I mentioned I'm one of 11 kids. I have a sister who's an OBGYN. She spent some time on the road with me. She lives in northern Illinois. But we were talking about the fact that of Wisconsin's 72 counties, on any given day, there's about 26 counties that don't have a practicing OBGYN in them. Think of what that means for basic women's health, for reproductive rights, for somebody who is getting ready to have a child, delivering a baby, doing well baby care. Like, this is the Wisconsin we live in 2026. It's actually worse than it was 5 years ago because of the Dobbs decision, because of what's happened. Like, we are making healthcare less accessible, and I think it's our responsibility to do that. I have a plan to cover every kid in Wisconsin up to 300% of the federal poverty level. There's about 6 or 7% of Wisconsin kids who have no health insurance. We should get to the point where everybody does, but it seems to me a Wisconsin value that we could start with, that every kid could start with health insurance. Like, let's say that that's the Wisconsin that we are and we want to be. Like, those are the types of things we can start to address. Now, there's other issues around housing and education. I'm happy to talk about those more. But the guy I met in Rhinelander last week who said, he's spending $54,000 just for, his basic health care and coming out of pocket more and more, for that. Like, that is just not a Wisconsin that is worthy of us, and we need to do something about it.
Yeah, so astute to start there with healthcare. I also wanted to talk about the other levers of affordability, like you just said, like talking about housing. Things just are getting more expensive across the board. Healthcare is contributing to that. According to the state health assessment, more than 1/3 of Wisconsin households are struggling to afford the necessities: housing, food, healthcare. So what kind of plans or thoughts do you have around alleviating some of those other beats like housing and nourishment?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I met a young fellow named Ian yesterday who's a carpenter in La Crosse, and he's 25. And what he wants to do is he wants to buy a beautiful old home. They have plenty of them in the city of La Crosse, and fix it up. But we were talking about the fact that when I was 20 years old, the average age for a first-time home buyer was 28. In 2020, it was 33. Last year, it was 40. So if Ian is like every other kid in Wisconsin, he's going to have to, I shouldn't say kid, every other young person on their way, he's going to have to wait another 15 years to be able to do that. And so, like, that's not viable for that slice of the American dream, for what that means for building equity and what it means for employers and public education. So what I have said is, we need to play catch up with other states in the Midwest. We have been beaten by Ohio and Michigan, states like that. I want to build 100,000 new entry-level homes over the next 4 years. That's about double the rate that we have been going at in Wisconsin. We're still a place that builds and does things. We should be able to plant a flag and say we're going to do that. I also have laid out plans for first-time homebuyers to be able, if you qualify, to access a 3% mortgage, but not just for first-time homebuyers. There are baby boomers all around the state who are sitting on 3 and 4 bedroom homes because it wouldn't pay for them to downsize. And so if you're a baby boomer and you meet certain qualifications, you would also be able to get a 3% state-backed mortgage. Like, those are things that take a marketplace that is stuck and start to pull the levers of government and start to loosen that in a way that's going to help employers, help the people who want to actually knit back communities that have just been driven asunder. Like, and you add to this the fact that in places like Madison and other places too, there are Wall Street companies that are building up or that are buying up multifamily homes and jacking up rents so that somebody is paying more for rent than they would for a mortgage. But they're kind of trapped in not being able to get out of that and not able to actually build the equity that would come with being able to be a homeowner.
I was going to ask, I mean, the building 100,000 homes sounds like a fantastic accomplishment. And we see it every day here in Madison around our housing issues and construction and not being able to build fast enough. Like how would you approach some of the challenges to getting to that goal?
Yeah, and there are already some programs to try to provide incentives for local government too, because a lot of this is around zoning. It's around the partnership between state and local government. It's not something that the state can do on its own, but I'm somebody, as part of my career, I ran the redevelopment authority for the city of Milwaukee. I worked in local economic development. I have worked with members, people who are mayors and village presidents and county executives all across the state, and they are interested, in this missing middle, in the two income family where maybe somebody's a teacher and somebody else is working a different type of a job, or they're both public employees. Like, how do you get to a point where there is the place that they can think of as their own, that's not a $650,000 or $800,000 McMansion, but something that's $250,000 or $300,000. That is the way that they can get in, start to build equity, and move forward.
I want to return to what we started talking about at the top of this conversation around how to win the general election. If you were to win the primary, your expected opponent on the Republican side of the ticket is frontrunner U.S. Representative Tom Tiffany. It's still a competitive primary, but Tiffany has the strong endorsement of President Donald Trump. The party's behind him. What is your plan for how you'd personally beat Tiffany?
Yeah, well, I mean, my plan to beat Tom Tiffany would be not much materially different than the plan that I have in the primary election. Compare us on experience, compare us on the ability to get things done and demonstrated leadership. That's what I have done over the course of 20 years. Starting in 2020, when he went to Congress, I don't think there's a member of Congress who has been more a Donald Trump 100%er than Tom Tiffany. And the harm that's been done to Wisconsin family farms, especially in this second term, the $800 billion that's being taken out of Medicaid over the next decade, the 6 million kids and families who are going to be taken off of SNAP benefits over the next year. Like, all of those things are things he's going to have to answer to. And I am, going to make sure that we have seen, and people talk about the fact that he's got these kitschy ads and his mom is showing up, and all that is fine. But there will come a day, and it's coming soon, where he's going to have to answer to all of those things. He's not going to be looking at the person, his neighbor over his shoulder or whoever. He's going to answer to Wisconsin residents and people who have been harmed by what's happened as a result of what's going on in the Trump administration. And so that's part of what he's going to have to answer to. What's really important, though, is that we make sure that we are also sharing a vision of the Wisconsin that we want to create, where people have access to lower cost health care, where we're not pitting property taxpayers against kids when it comes to public education in Wisconsin, where we are offering a pathway for people to become homeowners, where we are in a situation in Wisconsin where we have a child care crisis. We need to be able to offer solutions for young families so that they're not paying 20% of their income on their kids just to get basic child care. Like, those are the things we have to make sure we're offering. And Tom Tiffany has to live in the shadow of the Donald Trump tree, and he's going to have to answer to that. He's going to have to answer to, the first votes that he took being about decertifying the 2020 election. The fact that they are restricting voting rights, that he defends what ICE has done, which is unconscionable in Wisconsin, in Minnesota. at what's happened in Maine and Texas in the last few weeks, that like this is who he has to be, and we have to make him defend that. But by the same token, there are people who are hurting in Wisconsin, and we need to be able to answer to them, what are we going to do for you? Like, that's the important thing. And again, and I'm not for the next 3 weeks, nor for the next 3 months after that, going to back down from saying I'm the most transparent candidate in the race. I'm somebody who has, demonstrated leadership in lots of different ways. I'm the only candidate who's running Democrat or Republican who has laid out all of the negative opposition research that I did on myself and put it up on my website. Like, people should know what they're getting. We started the interview by talking about what's happened in the last week of this campaign and all of the ups and downs and all of the things that came out. I'm not sure that there isn't more shoes to drop even in the next 20 days, but people should know what they're getting from their candidates, because that will be who they're going to be as leaders. And I'm the only candidate in Wisconsin running for governor for doing this. I may be the only candidate in America who is doing that, but that's the level of transparency we should have about people who are running for office.
So we like to have fun on CityCast Madison, and so we got to have a little fun. Let's talk about your Wisconsin cred, your Wisconsin street cred. That can be a gravel road, an urban street, whatever. Tell us the most Wisconsin thing about you, or the most Wisconsin thing that you love.
Let's see. I was in Door County the other day, and I came in, and there was an event for me. It was in a bar restaurant, and there was a group that didn't know me, but they were playing cribbage over in the corner. And I said, I got this event to do, but what I'd really like to do is sit down and play a four-handed cribbage game with you, because that's how we solve problems in Wisconsin. So, like, in my own family, I was taught cribbage by my dad when I was probably 5 or 6. I did the same with my son. Again, for people who play cribbage, I've only been double skunked once in my life. It was by my son. It was by my son when he was like 8 years old, when I was still starting to teach him. So, like, that is, to me, like, that's a Wisconsin tradition, and it is something about the Wisconsin we should be. You could have dramatically different opinions on a whole host of issues. You get into the rhythm of a cribbage game, you could solve a lot of problems. Doing drinks and a cribbage game, or spending a night doing that, is probably as Wisconsin a thing as I do, and I do it anywhere. I would, I'd bring my Wisconsin-shaped cribbage board that my sister gave me, and I'd go anywhere around the state and have that conversation with anybody.
Okay, that is a fantastic answer, because I learned how to play cribbage with my grandma. I went with my grandmother to learn from another woman named Hattie at our church who wore big hats. So it is very Wisconsin, and the idea that it translates into being a good governor, I take that. I believe that. If you're good at cribbage.
It's not just an old person's game, though, too. Like, you could play, it's a great way, like, my kids, like, this is how they got to learn math. This is how people, where you don't have to have a tablet and a screen, you can get and gain knowledge on things like that, plus engage in relationships. And there's a whole banter that goes along with that, too. In my own family, my dad had sayings that he used 50 years ago that are still being said today. My dad died 36 years ago, but those still live on in his people around him. So I didn't know we were going to get into talking so much about cribbage, but I'd do that any day. The other thing I'd be happy to talk about is sports, but we could do that on a different day.
We only get one. No, I mean, my grandma is someone who I would play cards with. I think it's up there with euchre. It was a fabulous Wisconsin cred, so we'll take it. Joel Brennan, thank you so much for coming on CityCast Madison and telling us about your candidacy. It's been very informative.
Appreciate it, Bianca. Thanks for having me on.
That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm your host, Bianca Martin. If you enjoyed today's show, why not share this episode with someone who is voting in August? Help spread the word about CityCast Madison, share this episode out, get people informed, and we will be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, take good care, and thanks for listening.